reports out of San Antonio have it that Kawhi Leonard's camp is reportedly trying to strong arm the San Antonio Spurs into trading Kawhi, not to any team, but preferably a team in a big market. And not only any big market, but reportedly, and I'm going to be using that word a lot, New York. How do we even get here? I mean, when you think about the San Antonio Spurs, you think Kawhi Leonard. If there were to be a photo description in a dictionary of the San Antonio Spurs, it would probably first have to be Tim Duncan, but right after that, it would have to be Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard is the San Antonio Spurs. He's the human embodiment of the San Antonio Spurs. All he does is defend, run the floor, score, probably goes home and goes to bed early, wakes up the next morning and does it again. I mean, when you think about Kawhi Leonard, you think of the humble, unassuming, quiet superstar, boring, right? Again, hand in hand with the San Antonio Spurs, all the success they had, not a sexy franchise. They're boring. The NBA probably hates it when they're in the finals because it's going to be a boring, snooze fest and you're getting a small TV market. And then, you think about who your superstar is. At one point, it was Tim Duncan, the quiet, unassuming guy. And now it's Kawhi Leonard, the quiet, unassuming guy. I mean, there's that news article that shows Kawhi Leonard's car. It's a 19-year-old beat up truck. And he's talking about how he drives it because it's paid for. Meanwhile, this guy could afford whatever car he wants and multiple quantities. But again, some people are just by nature very humble, very quiet, and success doesn't change him. Money doesn't change him. Good for him. It's such a bizarre scenario what you have right now between Kawhi Leonard and the San Antonio Spurs. The San Antonio Spurs, when you look at the landscape of the Western Conference, you think of Golden State, you think of Houston, and then there is a bit of a logjam of teams in that middle tier. And you always think to yourself that San Antonio has to be considered amongst the Western Conference elite. When you have a coach like Greg Popovich, now granted towards the last few years, you're talking about the declining years of Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, obviously with Tim Duncan recently retiring, but Kawhi Leonard carried that torch, and now obviously LaMarcus Aldridge. But Kawhi Leonard he's the flag bearer of the Spurs. So when you figure you still have that formula together, the Spurs are still going to be a formidable force. But then Kawhi Leonard suffers an injury, and that's where it all starts to go haywire. Because there has been this epic game of chicken between Kawhi Leonard, the San Antonio Spurs, and I guess miscommunication, drama, Kawhi Leonard refusing to come back and play, the team having these, apparently supposedly emotional player only meetings. It's a saga. It's a legitimate saga what's going on between Kawhi Leonard and the San Antonio Spurs. And you have to think to yourself, is this a marriage that will survive this offseason? Probably not. When you consider what has gone on between Kawhi Leonard and his right quad injury, and players in this players only meeting talking about how they've apparently played through injuries a lot worse, and there being all sorts of mistrust between Kawhi's people, between the Spurs, reportedly Greg Popovich trying to get to players to talk to Kawhi Leonard. It's just been a bizarre situation all around because it's so unbecoming of the Spurs and it's so unbecoming of Kawhi Leonard. I mean, you're talking about a team and a player that are such a perfect fit for one another, but everything that's gone on, again, if you were to ask the question, gun to your head, do you think that Kawhi Leonard is going to be showing up to Spurs camp in a few months' time? The answer is probably no. And it's kind of inexplicable, but it looks as if the marriage between Kawhi Leonard and the San Antonio Spurs is going to come to an end. Which brings up the question, what now? What next? What next for the Spurs, and what next for just about every team in the NBA whose fan base is punching into Twitter, Kawhi Leonard plus their team? Because that's what always happens. Whenever you find out there's a player that's unhappy in their present situation, be it Knicks fans, be it, I would imagine, Bulls fans, be it Heat fans, every fan base thinks that that player is coming to them. And every fan base thinks that that player wants to come to their team and that it makes sense for them to come to their team. But in the case of Kawhi Leonard, there might be some traction between him and a potential union with the Knicks, especially if his handlers are, trying to steer Kawhi in the direction of a big market. And again, who knows what happens? Who knows what's true? Who knows what's smoke? Who knows what reality is, what's said through back channels, and what's allowed to be leaked into the news cycle. Because again, you always have to think that there is something to gain from a story hitting the news cycle. A reporter doesn't just invent a story or, magically you hear something through the grapevine. Somebody tells reporters something because they want it to get out. So now you don't know if that's coming from Kawhi's camp. You don't know if that's coming through somebody on the San Antonio side. But when you look at Kawhi Leonard's contract, he signed through 2020 currently with San Antonio. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent in 2020. I believe he has a player option. Yeah, he has a player option for 2019-2020. So next year is the last year that Kawhi Leonard is, I guess, locked in this contract. It's 5-year contract, 5-year, $94 million contract with the San Antonio Spurs. So whichever team trades for Kawhi Leonard, presuming he does get traded, is going to be taking on one more year, $20 million next year, and then the player option is for $21 million in 2019-2020. So let's get right to it. First question, what would the Knicks have to do to land a player like a Kawhi Leonard? I'm going to preface what I'm about to say by saying that I firmly believe, without bias, that Knicks fans are among the most knowledgeable fan bases in all of professional sports. Passionate too, but passion resides amongst all fan bases. So it's unfair to just say, well, we love our team more than you love yours or whatever. But as far as professional sports go, as far as American professional sports go, I put Knicks fans right up there as far as knowledge. I mean, Knicks fans know, they know player transactions. They know the cap. They know which assistant coach is working with which player. They know what plays the Knicks are running on offense, what they're doing on defense, what kind of defense do they run, and what kind of defensive rotations work with this current crop of players. I would almost equate it to how to what's said about a great point guard. The hallmark of a great point guard is that a point guard knows what's going to happen before it happens. They can see the play developing before the play develops. Knicks fans know what's on the horizon before it actually happens. That said, when it comes to this topic, as far as the Knicks acquiring Kawhi Leonard or potentially acquiring Kawhi Leonard, don't be that guy. Don't be that guy who calls into sports talk radio the I have a trade guy. You know how it works. Somebody calls into WFAN, they call into ESPN radio, and they'll preface it by making it as if they have this trade that no one else could have thought of, and that this trade is going to be such a balanced equation for both sides. And it's funny because they'll say, "Hey, I got a trade I want to run by you," and you will hear this eerie silence, and you can almost hear the show host like, "God, all right, what's your big trade? All right, here we go." And I have a trade guy will always propose a trade that involves his or her team getting the star player, stud, perennial all-star, or future can't-miss prospect. And in return, you're going to get 2, maybe 3 of our scrub players. We'll throw in one of our mid-level tier players. We might even throw in a draft pick just to, be so kind and generous towards you. But we won't give you a star player for a star player. I Have a Trade Guy is the same guy who was calling Sports Talk Radio around the time that the Knicks were in talks to trade for Carmelo Anthony. Well, back in 2009, 2010. And they were the ones saying that, all right, the Knicks should trade Landry Fields, Raymond. No. Yeah, actually, I should say, I take that back. Because Landry Fields was playing so well at the time that no Knicks fans wanted to include his name in any trade talks. No Knicks fans wanted to include any of these guys. Nobody wanted to touch Wilson Chandler. Nobody wanted to touch Danilo Gallinari. Raymond Felton was playing well, so he was untouchable. We basically wanted to give you our dredges. We wanted to give you a few draft picks, and maybe we'll throw in Tina Servasio, Jill Martin, and call it a day. And you're going to trade us Carmelo Anthony, your star player. In this instance, in the case of the Knicks potentially acquiring Kawhi Leonard, please do not call into Sports Talk Radio and tell a host that the Knicks should trade Frank Ntilikina, Tim Hardaway Jr., Emmanuel Mudiay, and a first-round pick, and that should be good enough to get Kawhi Leonard. Because if the Knicks do engage the Spurs in any manner relating to Kawhi Leonard, whether it's the Knicks calling the Spurs or the Spurs calling the Knicks, the conversation is going to begin and end with Kristaps Porzingis. Now, I was reading a passage earlier. I believe it was from Frank Isola reporting that the Spurs are apparently very high on Kristaps Porzingis. But, be that as it may, and whether or not you want to give up Porzingis in this kind of a deal, or if you want to hold on to Porzingis, it doesn't matter. If the Spurs are going to put a for sale sign on Kawhi Leonard, it's only going to be for the other team's star player or players and draft picks. It's not going to be so that a team like the Knicks can trade them, 2 mid-level players, one you don't know what he is prospect, and a couple of first rounders or throw in a second round or whatever, and expect that they're going to give you your franchise cornerstone player. If the Knicks are going to trade for the Spurs franchise cornerstone player, then the Spurs are going to ask for the Knicks franchise cornerstone player. So take that for what it's worth. The question then becomes, would you trade Kristaps Porzingis for Kawhi Leonard? And it's not a simple question. It's a very complicated question. Because you think back to when Kristaps Porzingis first became Kristaps Porzingis, his rookie year, and you're seeing this 7'3" freak of nature dribbling the ball like a guard, hitting threes like a shooting guard, driving in, thunderous dunk, putbacks, blocking shots, running the floor, doing anything and everything that you would never have imagined that a guy that's 7'3" will be able to do on a basketball floor. And earning the name Unicorn, obviously. But what do you have in Kawhi Leonard? Kawhi Leonard, arguably, is a top 4 NBA player. Arguably a top 2 two-way player. This is someone who in his last full healthy season, 2016, 2017, was averaging just under 26 points a game and is, as you all know, a lockdown defender. What is he right now? What is Kristaps Porzingis right now? Because if we were to remove the fact that both of them are going to be coming off injuries, would you make that trade? Keep this in mind. 2019 is right around the corner. And 2019 is going to have some premier free agents. You could potentially sell the opportunity to play alongside Kawhi Leonard. That is a pretty darn attractive proposition for any team. Knicks fans are hoping, however, that the selling point of playing alongside Kristaps Porzingis will be as equally as Knicks fans are obviously hoping that come 2019 free agency, that free agents will be equally as enticed to play alongside Kristaps Porzingis. It's a very complex question because you don't know, first of all, when Porzingis is going to return and what Porzingis is going to be when he comes back. And when you think about when Porzingis is going to come back, as it stands right now, at the earliest, it's going to be next season after the All-Star break, if at all. And I've said this on a couple of episodes now. If you're the Knicks and you have this young superstar in the making coming off an injury, a major injury like an ACL tear, why play him at all next year? You're not going to be good. You're going to start the season without Porzingis. You're going to play a good chunk of the season without Porzingis. You're not going to win a lot of games. The Knicks could very well find themselves in a position to have the number 1 overall pick or something in that region. So the question becomes, what do you do? I'm going to lay out both scenarios. You decide whichever way you want to swing. If the Knicks decide, you know what, it's enticing, but we're building something here. We have Porzingis. We have some young players. We have a high draft pick coming up, and we have a presumably high draft pick next year. We're going to continue to build upon what it is that we have, build around young assets, young controllable assets, develop these young assets to forge our own identity, and hope that Kristaps Porzingis is going to come back healthy, whether it be towards the end of next season or whether or not it's going to be at the beginning of the 2019-2020 season. That's scenario A. Scenario B is you trade Porzingis, but it's probably going to take more than that. You're probably going to be trading Porzingis at least 1 first-round pick in order to get Kawhi Leonard. So if you do that, yes, you're inheriting a flat-out superstar, one of the best in the league by far, and someone who has proven it. Someone who has been there and done that. Somebody that has, played in the bright lights of the playoffs, in the Western Conference, and done so successfully. With Porzingis, the potential is there, but he hasn't been there yet. He hasn't done it yet. Now, when you look at the skills, the tools that he possesses, is that something you'd be willing to trade? Is a quick fix something that you would be willing to sign up for? Would it be the smart thing to put this team in a microwave, have it come out, and ready to go with Kawhi Leonard, with a 2019 free agent who would be enamored with the prospect of playing alongside Kawhi Leonard in New York? Is that something you're going to sign up for? Or would you rather this team continue to build upon what it is that they're looking to build upon, even if it's a slow rebuild, even if this quote process is going to take another 2 years to get to the point where the Knicks are a playoff contender? That's the decision that the Knicks are going to have to make. And it's not going to be an easy decision because you're going to have a shiny superstar who, again, reportedly, his camp is trying to steer towards your team. You're either going to play out the process or you're going to trade for one of the bona fide stars, bona fide superstars of this league, and maybe even a top free agent to come along and play alongside Kawhi Leonard. So that's something the Knicks are going to have to decide, and it's not going to be an easy decision. Because on one hand, you have a potential superstar in the making in Porzingis and a young core that could be a promising young core for the Knicks, along with two potentially high draft picks over the next 2 years. But on the other hand, you'd be importing a bona fide superstar and very possibly a top 2019 free agent that would just be excited to play alongside that bona fide superstar under the bright lights of New York. What would you do? What do you prefer? Would you want to see Kawhi Leonard on the Knicks? And if it means parting ways with Kristaps Porzingis and maybe even a first-round draft pick, do you do it? Comment below. Website coming soon, knickfm.com.